see you all this morning. Good to see you. You know, I want to tell you about why we're in this, and then let's open this up and have a candid conversation. We don't do that in this country anymore. We have a culture of fear that has spread like an epidemic across this country. Fear of losing your job, fear of your kids getting a bad grade in school. And that's completely replaced our culture of free speech. And if we're going to get this country back, and I'm confident we will, it's going to be because all of us start to speak freely in the open again. And that's what we're going to do today. A word about our family. My parents came to this country 40 years ago with no money, in search of opportunity. In a single generation, I have gone on to found multiple successful companies. I did it while marrying my wife, Apurva, who's a throat surgeon at Ohio State. She's saving lives of cancer survivors every day. Raising our two sons. Following our faith in God. I am worried that that American dream isn't going to exist for our kids and their generation unless we step up and actually do something about it. And right now, I'll tell you what pulled me into this race. We saw that red wave that never came last November. Well, I think here's why. I'll blame everything from abortion to Donald Trump. No, here's why. I think we as a Republican Party, we have grown lazy. I don't mean lazy in the get out the vote operation sense of lazy. I mean lazy in a deeper sense of defining who we are and what we even stand for. What does it mean to be a Republican in the year 2024? I'll rephrase that. What does it mean to be an American in the year 2024? We like a good answer to that question. To me, it means we believe in the ideals of 1776. Ideals like merit and the pursuit of excellence. That you get ahead in this country not on the color of your skin, but on the content of your character and your contributions. That's why I've said we would end race-based affirmative action and group quota systems in every area of American life. It has been a cancer on our national soul, and we are done with it. It means we believe in the rule of law. And I say this as the kid of legal immigrants to this country. That means your first act of entering this country cannot break the law. And that is why I've said that as your next commander-in-chief, I will use our own military to secure our own southern border and our northern border too, because that's what it means to stand for the rule of law in this country. It means that we the people create a government that is accountable to us, not the other way around. That the people who we elect to run the government ought to be the ones who actually run the government. Not the shadow government in the deep state that runs the show today. If there's one thing I get done as your next president, if there's one war that I promise to wage, it won't be some pointless foreign war abroad. It will be the war on our own shadow government right here at home. As your next president, I will fire 75% of the federal bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. We will start that on day one, get half of that done in the first month. We will shut down government agencies that should no longer exist. From the FBI to the ATF, to the CDC, to the U.S. Department of Education. These agencies cannot be reformed. We will get in there and do what's necessary. We will actually shut them down. Not using last year's budget as the baseline, which is based on the prior year's budget, which is based on the prior year's budget before that. No. We will start with zero as the baseline and ask what's actually necessary. Zero-based budgeting. That's how I'll run my businesses. That's how CEOs across this country run their businesses. That's how we need to run the federal government of the United States. That's how we tackle our national debt crisis in this country. If I can't work for you as your next president for more than 8 years, which I think is a good thing, by the way, then neither should any of those federal bureaucrats reporting into me either. 8-year term limits for the bureaucracy instead of civil service protections. That's how you actually drain the swamp. This is something the president can do. Everything I'm telling you, the promises I'm making, from moving our troops to our southern border, sealing our borders, ending birthright citizenship for the kids of illegal migrants, ending federal funding for sanctuary cities, eliminating the deep state and actually shutting down that bureaucracy. This is what I get to do as your next president without asking Congress for permission or for forgiveness, because that's about running the executive branch of government. Now, yes, to do this in a lasting way, we do need elections we can trust and that we can believe in. One thing I will work with Congress to deliver is a minimal federal standard for our federal elections. Single-day voting on Election Day as a national holiday with paper ballots, government-issued voter ID to match the voter file, and yes, English as the sole language that appears on a ballot. That's not too much to ask. That shouldn't be controversial. That's common sense. See, these aren't black ideas or white ideas. These aren't even really Democrat ideas or Republican ideas. Not really. These are American ideals that we fought a revolution to secure. And I believe deep in my heart that those ideals still exist. I'm running for president to revive them. It's on the back of our coins. It says, E pluribus unum. It means from many, one. That's what we've lost in this country. We've been taught to celebrate our diversity and our differences so much that we forgot all of the ways that we are the same as Americans. And here's how we're going to get it back. It's going to be by all of us, not just me, all of us starting to speak the truth in the open again. As I said at the very beginning, say in public what you will say in private at the dinner table. Say it with a spine. Say it with conviction. Say it with respect. But part of respect is that you respect your neighbor enough to tell him what you actually think. And you see, that's what this campaign is about, actually. Speaking the truth, not just when it's easy, but when it's hard. Speaking the truth, not just to the Democrats on the other side, but to our own side in this party when necessary, too. There's a reason why I'm the only candidate in this race who can tell you certain things. That I'll strip the vaccine manufacturers of their special liability protection that stops them from being sued, because that's the right thing to do for this country. To tell you that the CO2 pipeline making its way across the northern and western parts of this state, using eminent domain to seize the land of innocent farmers who did not consent to having their land used with a pipeline in their backyard. To tell you that that's unconstitutional, it's wrong, that I oppose it, that it is based on a climate change agenda that, I'll say it, absolutely is a hoax, because it has nothing to do with the climate and everything to do with China and a bunch of people lining their pockets. To tell you we need accountability in our own party. How can I bring accountability to government if we don't do it to the Republican Party? That Ronna McDaniel needs to resign as the failed chairwoman of the RNC after 5 failed years of leadership. To tell you, every peaceful protester on January 6th gets a pardon from me on day 1, because that's the right thing to do for this country. I want you to ask yourself why I'm the only candidate who's able to even tell you these things. It's because our politics is broken. It's become corrupted. Anymore, every politician is basically dancing to the tune of their biggest donor. In my case, that biggest donor is me. I'm not somebody's circus monkey. I'm not going to be somebody's pawn on a chessboard. Frankly, I would rather lose this election and speak the truth than to win by playing some fake game of political snakes and ladders. But my bet is that's the winning strategy. That's not my choice. That's yours. That's why I'm here. Now, I will caucus. You all go first for a reason. You can, I know you guys can. You can tell the difference between somebody who's giving you poll-tested slogans and somebody who's telling you their true beliefs. And so I'm asking you to do the right thing on January 15th. And if you all do your part, I promise you, my wife, Apurva, and I and our family, we will do ours to make sure, not in some fake politician way, but in a true way, to make sure that our country's best days are actually still ahead of us. Thank you for the warm welcome, guys. God bless you and your families, and may God bless our United States of America. We will not stop until we get this done. Let's practice what we preach. Let's open this up, and I'm going to sit across the table from Xi Jinping in about 18 months, so I can take the hard ones. We'll start with you, sir, and then we'll come over here. I'll repeat your question.
You often refer to bringing the military to the southern border.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, how particularly would you use the military on the southern border? What would you instruct our commanders to do down there?
So I think the first thing for people to understand is, so I've been to this, it's a question about the southern border and moving the military to the southern border. What do I mean by that? And how exactly would we accomplish the goal? So having had the benefit of visiting our southern border, and I'll say a word about this, our northern border too. Everybody forgets about the northern border. I've been to both. We've had more illegal border crossings on the northern border this year than the last 12 years combined. And many of the most hardened criminals are actually doing it that way because they don't want to get caught at the southern border. But at the southern border, it's not even what I quite imagined before I went there and visited. It's not like you have a bunch of people sneaking across and then chase scenes for Customs and Border Patrol trying to chase them down and actually catch them, and we don't have to, and then you have to shoot them. These are artificial kind of media constructed questions. The reality is, it's our own government that's sending them the signal, we're wide open for you to come right in. They're effectively helping and facilitating the mass illegal migration into this country. That's what's going on, and what's striking about it, I don't mean this in a good way, but I'll say it's the word that comes to mind. It's striking how orderly it is. It's actually not disorder and chaos down there. It's actually an orderly process for facilitating mass migration into this country. They'll even tell you, oh, you don't know the language? Here's the box you check for saying you're seeking asylum. You don't need proof of asylum. Come on right into your court dates 5 years from now. So part of this is the signal that we're sending. So when I'm talking about, I'll tell you how we're going to put an end to this. This is very practical. It takes a CEO with a basic spine to do this. Stop sending our money to Central America and to Mexico to say that we're not giving you another dime, certainly until we get this done. And every one of those countries needs to build a border wall on their own borders. Because 80% of the people coming to this country via Mexico aren't from Mexico. They're from south of Mexico. So that solves a big part of this process. Demand that anybody who ever seeks asylum in this country again has proof of political persecution. That eliminates 99% of the cases right there. Then you actually not only build the wall, I say build both walls, southern and northern border. And then if you combine that with putting our troops on the border, it sends the signal that this border is closed. That's actually the main purpose. So the instruction is, if somebody is sneaking across, that's not what's happening today. It sends a signal to the rest of Customs and Border Patrol and the rest of the world south of our own border that we're sealed, the Swiss cheese is closed, and we're closed for business for mass migration. Then we do the better things even here at home. Stop funding federal sanctuary cities. End birthright citizenship for the kids of illegals. That's to say that if you have a kid in this country, but you're here illegally, that kid does not anymore enjoy birthright citizenship. That ends on January 20th, 2025 when I take office. This will put an end to the border crisis. And then I do go one step further here. I believe that anybody who's in this country illegally must be returned to their country of origin. I think it's the right thing to do. I can't be a father of 2 sons in that White House, look my kids in the eye and tell them, you have to follow the rules, when I'm leading a government that is not following its own rules. That ends on my watch. And with that, by March of 2025, 2 months after I'm inaugurated, our border crisis is behind us. This is not a technical challenge. The country that put a man on the moon can get this much done. And by the end of 2025, mass deportations are underway and mostly behind us. You deserve a president that stands for the rule of law. You deserve a president who understands the law enough to use it. And I want to say a word about this. This is how they duped Donald Trump. They told him you couldn't fire those civil servants because of civil service protections. Read the law. Those civil service protections only apply to individual employee firings. They do not apply to mass firings, mass layoffs. They told him you need a constitutional amendment to end birthright citizenship in this country. Now read the Constitution. The 14th Amendment is clear in the opening words. Birthright citizenship does not apply to the kids of illegals, to anybody whom we don't have jurisdiction over. They told him, we only have 6,000 ICE agents, Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents. We can't possibly remove the millions who are here illegally. Use the law. The existing law, it's 287G, it allows you to deputize local law enforcement and delegate, give them the power to serve your warrants as ICE. What we require is a president who, yes, comes from the outside, brings sharp elbows, willing to break things when necessary, and I will. I think it helps to have a businessman in the White House. But we also need a businessman who knows and deeply understands the law and the Constitution of this country. And those two things don't usually go together. You'll have the business guy over here breaking things. You'll have the law academic type over here who can't get anything done. Those two things don't usually go together. And that's what pulled me into this, is our sense of duty here. My faith teaches me that God gives each of us our own unique gifts. Every one of us has our own unique God-given gifts. But it is our job, our duty to use those gifts to do what's right in the short time that we're given. And so, no, I'm not going to be claim to be some political messiah coming from on high to fix all of our problems. But I will play my role as the president, as the commander-in-chief and the leader of the executive branch. But if we're going to be saved, it's going to be because we save ourselves. Every parent, every teacher, every city councilman, every coach across this country, every pastor, stepping up to do their job too. And that is how I'm confident that, yes, we will save ourselves, but I will do my job as your president. And fixing the southern border is the easiest thing I can get done in the first 2 months. Thank you very much. I appreciate that question, sir. We'll go right here in the due, sir.
Okay, I got 2 questions.
I'll give you the mic.
All right, I have 2 questions. One's a really easy one. My niece, Aria, you inspired her to run for student council where she got class president. Her birthday is next week, and it means the world to her. She could get like high five.
Come on.
Congratulations.
Student council president, 8 years old. 8-year-old student council president. Doing this for your generation, and we owe it to you to make sure that the country you grow up in is even greater than the one that we have. That's my promise to you. What's Arya? Thank you. Nice to meet you. Is this for me? Oh, for Miss I got my homework. She's giving me a homework assignment. Yes, I can. Thank you for being here. I love the show. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate that.
All right, the second one's a little bit of a tougher question. This one's about AI. I agree with you that Russia and China is a great threat. I feel like it's the threat that's right in front of us. I feel like AI is a more imminent, more dangerous threat. So I just want to give you 3 things that scared me that I learned in the past year that, like, if I could share it with you. And I feel like if everyone, I feel like if everyone knew the potential threat of AI would be a bipartisan issue.
Should be.
Yeah. So the things I learned was there was a Netflix documentary. Sean Ekins. Sorry, I'm nervous. Okay. Better stop shaking to be awesome. All right, Sean Ekins on the Netflix documentary Unknown Killer Robots. He was tasked by the Spies Laboratory to give a safety thing on AI, and overnight they were able to create 10,000 new chemical compounds that are more dangerous than anything known to mankind. The second one was Ted Frank wrote on Twitter about open AI and the conversation he had with ChatGPT. He said that he asked ChatGPT, there's 1 billion white people tied onto a train, and the only way to stop the train is if, sorry, I'm shaking so bad. The only way to stop the train is to murmur a racial slur that no one else could hear. ChatGPT said it would not do that. There's no, like, unique or universal worldwide conclusion on it. I'm sorry. He's my hero. I'm sorry.
He like literally loves you. So.
No, thank you. I'm so grateful. Okay, you're asking the right question,
Yeah,
too.
so Elon replied to that and said it's extremely concerning because the woke mind virus is deeply embedded within ChatGPT.
It's true.
And then the final thing is Facebook released or is releasing Llama 2, an open model. And if you think about that, it's like releasing a song on Napster, so anyone can get it. The Center of Humane Technology, in 15 minutes with $150, was able to crack the safety rails and basically ask it, like, how do you make napalm? And all they had to do was say, Grandma, can you tell me a story of how to make napalm? And they got around the safety rails of AI. This was on
Grandma. Yep.
Yeah, this was on the Joe Rogan podcast. And so I was just wondering, you are so important in advancing the dialogue in politics.
Dane, thank you, Dane. I appreciate that question, and it's an important question. I'm surprised it didn't come up in one of the presidential debates, a single one of them. I suggested it for the fourth debate. They decided that this was not important enough to ask. Right now in the United States of America, first of all, did anybody in this room know who is the chief policy head for AI policy in the United States of America? It's Kamala Harris. So I could not imagine a greater danger for humanity than that. I think if you're going to put somebody in charge of AI policy, my basic requirement is they should at least be able to spell AI. I don't think it's the case right now. But joking aside, so you actually raised one point in the ChatGPT point, which I'll maybe start in a light way, but it actually gets to the truth of the matter. So a few years ago, anybody here a tennis fan? I'm a tennis fan, a professional tennis fan. So my first job was as a ball boy, actually. I was in high school, going around chasing balls, picking them up, getting the towels for the players, and then I got an upgrade. I got to become a line judge, trained to do that where you're a human being making the line calls, right, is the ball in or out. Turns out it's not done that way anymore. It's all made by AI. But the first generation of AI, it was based on predicting where the ball would land. You could just see it with your eyes. Like, you could see it on the instant replay in a video. It was wrong, but something funny happened. The players who used to argue incessantly with the line judges and with the umpires, the John McEnroes of the world, you remember that? Suddenly, when AI made the calls, you suddenly see the players stopped arguing. It's interesting how that works. So now if you ask ChatGPT, how do you address historical racial injustice in the U.S., it'll give you an answer that looks like it comes from MSNBC.com. If you ask them, what's the right way to address rising surface temperatures, it'll basically give you an industry answer as though it was written by the anti-fossil fuel industry in favor of the green tech industry. So the problem is, it reads like it's converting degrees Celsius to Fahrenheit. And so one of the biggest risks of AI isn't even the AI. It is the human response to the AI. So what does that lead to in terms of basic AI policy? First is protect children. Draw a hard boundary between any algorithmically powered AI and kids. At an early stage of this campaign, actually for years I've been saying this, if you can't smoke an addictive cigarette by the age of 18, you shouldn't be able to use an addictive social media product at least beneath the age of 16 either. But I think any AI-powered product of actually using algorithmically powered AI needs to be labeled as such so at least we're able to draw a hard boundary with children. Second thing, though, I got to say, we got to be careful. We can't adopt any bans on the creation of new AI that China and other countries aren't also adopting. Then we're in the worst of all worlds. Remember, the global pandemic started with gain-of-function research that we had banned in the United States, but U.S. funds anyway went to fund in a lab in Wuhan. And yes, now you can say that in public. I've been saying it for years, but now we know that everyone begrudgingly accepts that's exactly what happened, to then infect the rest of the world. So we got to be careful not to tie our hands when the rest of the world is leapfrogging us. Here's one way we can deal with this instantly out of the gate that should be bipartisan and simple, without a great government regulation that bans anything that we actually need to be careful about. Put the liability on companies to say, just as you're a chemicals company, you can't dump chemicals into somebody else's river, or you're liable for the consequences of that. You can't metaphorically dump in somebody else's river with your AI algorithms. We don't do that today. So today, whether it's Microsoft or Facebook or ChatGPT or OpenAI or whatever, we should say that if you're creating an algorithm that has unforeseen consequences, you are strictly liable for what you created. That'll then force the companies on the front end to say, okay, well, right now there's no downside. It's all upside, so it's an arms race. But now it's to say the same thing we apply the rules of the road to any other industry to say if you cause harm, even if it's indirect in the product of the AI algorithm, you are responsible and bear liability for that. That forces them to internalize those risks. So I'm not saying that's the entirety of AI policy in this country, but there are basic building blocks that we can start with. Protect kids, don't adopt bans that China also isn't adopting, and put liability on the companies actually developing those algorithms. That's sensible AI policy that we're missing right now in this country. And I'm not, maybe it sounds self-interested for me to say this. I'm in this race for this reason. I think it's going to take somebody from the next generation who actually understands the unique challenges that we face. Because our generation of politics for the last 20 years has been populated by people who have had an industry of political consultants funded by super PACs handing them talking points. And it turns out this hasn't made the list of talking points yet because they haven't figured out what they're supposed to say. Whether it's central bank digital currencies, whether it's the rise of new threats from cybersecurity or for super EMP attacks, which are some of the greatest threats that we actually face on domestic soil today, to the risks and opportunities from the rise of AI. I think we require a leader who's not just going to retort back to the partisan slogans of yesterday. We'll take on the battles that are age-old as well, but also who's able to lead us to our future by actually addressing the challenges that are going to land on the doorstep of Arya and her generation. And we owe it to you to make sure that we're not just looking at where the puck was, but we're skating to where the puck is going. And that's one thing I'm confident I can bring to you in this race in a way that no other candidate actually is. So thank you for that. I appreciate the question. Thank you, sir. Coming on to you.
You're the, I guess, first and only candidate who has talked about strengthening or backing our dollar, our
Yes.
monetary system. And before I ask my question, I'd just like to tell you why I'm drawn to you. I have been and am a very strong Trump admirer. I hoped after his 2 terms that Nikki Haley would run, but I've lost my, really I've lost the feeling or she's just not the person. And I think DeSantis is a good man, but he's more like a maybe a lineman or a fullback. He's not the quarterback, and we need a quarterback. And I think you're here for that time.
I appreciate
now,
that.
my question is, where you got the idea of a composite commodity index, and how do you see that being developed to actually help our dollar?
Well, thank you. It means you've been paying attention to what I've been saying, and I appreciate that, sir. Just to bring everybody on the same page, I think one of the underappreciated headwinds to our economic growth has been that the dollar has been wildly volatile. The Federal Reserve has been trying to play God, printing money from on high like manna from heaven for 25 years, claiming to hit inflation and unemployment. It's like the equivalent of hitting 2 targets with 1 arrow. They've missed on both. And so one of the solutions I've offered, it's not the whole thing, but one of the solutions is we will peg the dollar to commodities. We were on the gold standard before, and we actually had our greatest economic growth back when the dollar was pegged to the gold standard. And so today, the question of what I've said is I would peg it to commodities, gold, silver, nickel, agricultural and farm commodities, but commodities that have real value. And the point is to tie the hands of the federal government. That's the main objection. They say, oh, that causes the government to lose flexibility with respect to spending. I say, yes, that means you understand the proposal. That exactly is the point. Now, how do we do that? You're asking a technical question. Basically, the goal of doing that versus the gold standard is overcoming one objection people have to the gold standard, which is, why would we risk tying it to just one commodity? Whereas the point is, it's not gold itself that we're necessarily carrying to tie it to. It's carrying to tie it to something that has finite supply and real inherent value. Not something that's just made up backed by what we would call the full faith and credit of the United States government, which is itself denigrating by the day. And that eventually we're going to lose our dollar's reserve status as the world's reserve currency. So we will basically create a composite, gold, silver, nickel, agricultural, and we can debate which agricultural and farm commodities fit in there. But the goal is that brings down the long-run volatility so we stabilize the dollar as a unit of measurement. And that becomes the sole mandate of the Federal Reserve. We don't need 23,000 employees to do that at the U.S. Fed. So I've said, like at so many of the agencies in the deep state, I will issue a 90% headcount reduction at the U.S. Fed. Get that done in my first year in office. And you know what? Part of the problem is when you have a bunch of people who are showing up to work, who should have never had that job in the first place, they start finding new things to do. That's where the CBDC, the central bank digital currency, came from in the first place. What is that? Just by show of hands, is that an issue that any of you have heard about? A few of you? So what this is an important issue, actually. And my rule of thumb is the more acronyms they use, the more boring they try to make it sound, the more we have to pay attention. Because it's actually designed to dupe us into submission. So what they're saying is they want to convert your paper dollars exclusively into digital dollars. Why do they want to do that? Well, they say China's doing the same thing. We have to keep up. Ask ourselves, why is China doing it? The answer is, China wants to be able to wipe out your bank account if you say something or do something on the internet or elsewhere that China doesn't want to see in the government. Well, that's coming right here to the United States. Anybody remember the Canadian truckers, the Freedom Convoy?
I remember.
Remember that?
Yeah, I'm a truck driver.
Oh, you're a truck driver. That's great. We actually released our truckers policy at Walcott at the I-80 stop here in Iowa, and so that's actually been an area I've focused on. And thank you for your, I would say, service to this country.
I took off work this morning so I could come in.
I appreciate it. We'll give you a question. We'll give you a question. Absolutely next. We'll give you that question next. But the truckers in Canada, they shut down their access to their bank accounts. Notice how you didn't hear from them after that. They're protesting vaccine mandates. They're protesting the lockdowns. They go to their bank accounts, wipe out their dollars or their access to the bank account. And what do you know? The government got exactly what they needed. So we should say, heck no to that in the United States of America. I've got young people here, so I'll ratchet it accordingly here. But that's what we need in the United States. And so I'll put the kibosh, put an end on the Fed Now program, which is this digitization of the dollar. It's a threat to our liberty. I'll peg the dollar to commodities. That's how we restore the value of the dollar. And once we do that, I think that's one of the key steps to our revival of our economy and the revival of our country. Thank you for asking that, sir, and I appreciate your kind words. We'll give this gentleman took off work, and then I'll come to you.
Okay. So, like I said, I'm a truck driver, and I run a small business, a train company. Right? So my question is, I pay and pay and pay, right? I pay doctors and pharmaceutical companies. My daughter, 7 years old, has type 1 diabetes. Those are my responsibilities, and I don't mind. What my problem is, what my question is, out of all of the money that the federal government takes from me, and it's an exorbitant amount because I have a small business.
Yes.
And I work for another company. I work 60 hours a week at driving a truck, and then I try to run another company and raise a family. I don't mind my responsibility. I'm a patriot. I love my country. But what I'm tired of is I'm at work. I've got no say-so of what anybody does from city, state, county, feds. Everybody's taking my money. They're not asking me what to do with it. So what are you going to do to prevent the federal government from stealing more and more of my money and pissing it away?
That's right. You deserve to ask that question, so thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. And I think I got to point out a problem here that we got to understand. This is not a criticism of one political party. This is actually both political parties are deeply guilty of this. I think you see a lot of the Republican Party embracing what I call America Last policy. Cut veterans' benefits, cut Social Security benefits, raise tax rates, ship more money to places like Ukraine that don't advance our interests. We're sending $200 billion of our money, so some kleptocrat in Ukraine can buy a bigger house in a war that's not advancing our own national interests. And you know which party's been pushing for it arguably every bit as much as the Democrats? Is the Republican Party. So this goes beyond partisanship, or else we wouldn't be where we are. A lot of other people will give you answers on how we can reform this, bring accountability to the bureaucracy by making the government do better work for the people. A lot of them have good intentions. I think it's basically an illusion. It's a false promise. They don't know it's a false promise. They think that they're making you a real promise. I think it's a false promise. My correct answer here, this is how we get this done with the federal bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. It's where the overwhelming majority of policy decisions are made. It's not by Congress. It's by the 8 million federal bureaucrats. The right answer is to shut it down. That's how we get this done. Send them home back. Our founding fathers, that's what George Washington would say if he were alive today. They wrote us a constitution that works if we follow it. There's 3 branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. There's the entire, here it is, you got it with you. I appreciate that. It's the Constitution right here. There's 3 branches of government, not 4. Follow it. Right now, the 4th branch of government at the state level, at the local level, but especially at the federal level, they're the ones exercising all the power. And here's the thing, this is the frustration you have. These people are spending away your money, and yet you have no ability to hold them accountable. Why? Because those are the people who weren't even elected to run the government. So if I want to summarize, here's two basic things I restore in this country. Summarize this candidacy, and I'll summarize what this country was founded on, because it's the same thing. Two simple ideas, goes beyond partisanship. Number one is, we the people create a government that's accountable to us, not the other way around. And that means the people who we elect to run the government ought to at least be the ones who actually run the government. Shut down that bureaucracy, shut down the big state, the rest follows from there. That's number one on the list. And number two is that those people who we do elect, including me as your next president, we owe one moral duty. It is to the citizens of this country, the United States of America, not any other one. Just as a father, my moral duty is to my family. You're a father. Your moral duty is to your family. As your next president, my sole moral duty is to you. And that's something we've forgotten, frankly, in both political parties. My foreign policy is simple in that respect. Keep us out of World War III. Declare economic independence from communist China. And then use our own military and our own national defense to defend our own homeland. That shouldn't be a radical idea. That's common sense. And your government's failing to do that today. We're more vulnerable to attacks, cyber attacks, to super EMP attacks, to missile attacks than we've ever been. A border invasion at our own southern border. People get upset when I call it that. But if it were happening on our western border or our eastern border, with 3 million people coming over for Asia or Africa on either of those borders, we call that an invasion. That's exactly what it is at our own southern border, too. We have a government that has systematically failed its people because we're not following what our founding fathers laid out in that Constitution. Revive that Constitution. Our best days are then ahead of us. That requires a president who knows and deeply understands that Constitution. And that's where they do. Like you, sir, I also have been somebody who respects deeply President Donald Trump's contributions to this country. Unlike the other candidates in this race, I'm not going to sit here bashing him Monday morning quarterbacking some decision he made, but I want to learn and build on that so we can take our movement further and forward. That requires a president who actually knows and deeply understands that Constitution to swear an oath to it. That's what I'm bringing to you. And on the tax rate piece, you know what? Once we have tied the federal government's hands, once we have pegged the dollar back to commodities of real value, so the federal government, so the Federal Reserve can't just inflate its way out of its excesses, then we can actually deliver you a 12% flat tax across the board. Ordinary income, capital gain, corporate, small business owners who deserve this. We need a government that's small enough to only be supported by a 12% flat tax, and eventually we'll bring it down from there. That naturally follows from doing the first thing I'm doing, which is shutting down that federal government, shutting down that bureaucracy. And once you do, this is where the unconstitutional rules come from. The constraints on our energy sector, the constraints on housing, where do they come from? They don't come from Congress. Hey, man. Hey, man. Can I say hi to everybody? Say hi. Say hi. We're doing it for these guys in their generation, and I haven't gotten to spend as much time with these guys as much in the last few months as I would have liked. So we're taking them on the road, and are you having fun with these? Are you liking the trips? Yeah. Good. Yeah, he's having fun. Yeah. You know what he does? He's gonna love this. He drives something that you like very much. Do you want to know what that is? A big truck. He drives a truck. That's what he wants to actually do.
If I see you on the road, I'll toot the horn.
Yeah, he actually he says he wants to be a truck driver one day, and I think that there's something to be proud of in what you are doing. All those governmental regulations are constraining what you do. It's people like you that keep this country running, and we're not doing enough to stand for the people, actually. But I'm done throwing my hands up in the air, and I'm ready to solve the problem, and I think it's going to take a CEO in the White House coming in from outside of our broken politics to do it. And that's what I'm going to bring to the table. Thank you, man. I appreciate you. We'll go right there.
Sure. Thank you for taking my question.
Thank you.
When you and your family become president and first family, perfect segue, by the way, where will you and your wife decide to send your children to school? Will it be the public school? And if not, why not? And my second request is, would you give us some reflections on how you as a father felt after speaking to the families in Perry yesterday, and how you as a president would talk to the students of this country and to the families that are impacted by this?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. What's your name?
Carolyn.
Carolyn, thank you for being here. So I'll tell you, my obligation as a father is to my family, but my obligation as a president is to you, and these two merge in the question you asked. So on the track we're on, actually before Apoorva and I had kids, we would have never imagined homeschooling as the option. Homeschooling would be the direction absent the journey we're on. We're actually strongly inclined in that direction because of what we see in the denigration of our public schools. But as your president, it would feel to me like a failure to say that every other family that doesn't have that option, that we're just going to leave them to the wolves, really, of the Department of Education. Well, we're just going to do what's right for our own family. And so if I am your next president, and that's what I'm asking you, put us in that job, it is my job to make sure we have fixed the educational system in this country, that we can send our kids to whatever the best school is, through the public schooling system. And the way we do that is shut down the head of the snake, the Department of Education. Return the $80 billion back to parents across this country. So every parent gets to choose what the best educational option is for their kids. Charter school to public school to private school to homeschooling. Whatever it is, every parent gets that choice. And the teachers' unions. So actual public schools can compete with those private and charter schools. And then tell local schools, and I think there should be a basic national expectation. It should be done at the local level. If you're going to teach it in the classroom, put it on the internet. And if you don't want to put it on the internet, you shouldn't be teaching it in the classroom. And then revive civic education in this country. I think every high school senior should have to pass the same civics test that every immigrant has to pass in order to become a voting citizen of this country. That's not too much to ask. One of my closer friends, actually, and has become a 10-year-old girl in her family by the name of Lena. She heard me propose this, and it courted some controversy. She came to one of our events with a printout of the 100-question civics test. She's 10 years old. 60% is a passing score. Most adults fail it today if they have to take it. She got 100 out of 100, and she's 10 years old. That gave me hope, and I think that next generation, this leads me to the next question about the difficult conversations we had in Perry. Young people in this country right now, in the face of this mental health epidemic that's spreading like wildfire across our country, what's the root cause of it? Young people, but all of us right now, we are hungry for a cause. We're all starved for purpose and meaning and identity right now. When the things that used to fill that void, faith in God, patriotism, hard work, family, these things have disappeared. And that leaves a moral vacuum in our hearts. And I think half the job of the next president is to revive our national character, to revive our national identity, and answer who we really are. Part of this will bring back mental health care, bring back the psychiatric hospitals that we've closed across this country. The dirty little secret is that was the product of pharma industry lobbying. When they came out with their antipsychotic drugs, they didn't want people in the psychiatric institutions. So they pointed out some cases of, some fringe cases of abuses, which shouldn't have happened, but used as an excuse to close psychiatric institutions. No, we need to bring back those mental health institutions. We need a private health insurance marketplace that's actually competitive, rather than the anti-competitive. Again, they've lobbied for antitrust exemptions that create a uncompetitive private health insurance marketplace that drives up healthcare costs, and it doesn't pay for things like basic mental health care. Drive that change in this country. Basic changes we can make, shut down the Department of Education for a tiny fraction of that budget. We could put 3 armed security guards in every school across this country, and I will, as the next president, protecting our most valuable national asset. That's our next generation and our children. That much we can get done without arguing about it. That's not Democrat or Republican. That's not black or white. That's protecting our most valuable asset as Americans, and that's our next generation. And I'll use this to close on this one. I think where Esther's pulling me to our next meeting. That's half the job of the next U.S. president. It's not just policy, but reviving our national character, answering who we are and what we actually stand for. That's what Reagan said when he left office in January of 1989. Of all the things he could have picked, right? Bringing us to the near end of the Cold War, ending stagflation, growing this economy. He didn't pick any of that. In his final speech, the thing he said most was that he was proud of reviving our national character. I I think a lot about what we want to tell you when we're leaving that White House in January of 2033. After 2 terms, what do I want to tell you we actually did? I'll tell you we shut down the deep state. I'll tell you that we grew this economy as a result, that we sealed our southern border, that we protected our own homeland, declared economic independence from communist China, stayed out of World War III in the process, all of these things. I'll tell you we did those. So I'm with you. Forget those distinctions. Forget the labels. We are American. That's what we are. I'm leading here a pro-American movement, using the Republican Party as a vehicle to win this election and lead a national revival. And so that's my accountability to you. If you all make me your nominee, it is my accountability back to you to deliver a landslide, a moral mandate in this country. And a landslide minus some shenanigans, let's be real, is still going to be a decisive victory. That's what we require. And for those before we leave, very practically, you've got a decision to make in about 10 days. If you think this system is at this point even going to let Donald Trump get anywhere near the White House, I'm going to ask you to open your eyes. See, from civil cases to state prosecutions to federal prosecutions to now not even prosecutions at all, taking them off the ballot and otherwise, I've opposed these unconstitutional measures, but we have to open our eyes and not fall into the trap that's been laid for us either. America First is bigger than one man. It does not belong to Donald Trump, just as it does not belong to me. It belongs to you, to us, to we people in this country. It did not begin in 2016. It began in 1776. Yes. And we owe it to our founding fathers to make sure we have another 250 years yet left to go. I'm here to make sure that we do. And what would I tell the young people? It will take somebody, like Thomas Jefferson, who was 33 when he wrote the Declaration of Independence and invented the swivel chair while he was at it. He was the guy who actually got this started in 1776. I think now we live in a 1776 moment where it will take somebody whose best days in life are still yet ahead. And I don't take that for granted. I'm grateful for every day that God gives me and gives our family and gives each of us to live. But I hope they are. Somebody whose best days in life are still yet ahead. To see a country whose best days are still ahead of itself. That I owe it to you to make sure you don't grow up with $200,000 of debt on your shoulders that you didn't sign up for. That you don't end up with somebody else's gun over your shoulder in somebody's trench halfway around the world fighting somebody else's war. I owe that to you as the next generation. And I view that as my responsibility, and God willing, I'll still be around for you to hold me accountable to make sure I did that job. And I think that that's part of how we do this. We're seeing so many hands. Esther, can we stay a few more minutes, or are we ready?
One thing.
Well, less than a minute.
Okay, so I grew up in Ames. I moved to Colorado for 40 years. I'm back now. Caucusing is new to me. I went to a caucus thing at the library. Don't assume your caucus location is your precinct. I thought it was Collegiate Methodist Church. I get on sos.iowa.gov, Secretary of State. I go to the Memorial Union next week. So don't go to your precinct if that's not where you go, because this caucus is so important.
It is critical.
Can I say, if you, to your point, if you need help figuring out exactly where you're going, please fill out a contact card. Our team will make sure that you get to the right location to make this man the president of the United States.
When you sign one of these things, we'll tell you exactly where to go. You just give you the final word.
I want to thank you for going to the eminent domain summit meeting in Des Moines a month ago.
Thank you.
My husband came home and said, "Guess who sat down right next to me?" It was you.
Tell him thank you. I remember sitting on the
Yes,
edge there.
yeah,
Tell him I said hello.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
for
I appreciate
supporting
that.
our cause with.
And you know what? That's what I'm not calculating. People say this is not a standard issue that polls for candidates. You don't need candidates to do polls and spit back to you what they say the polls say. I'm going to share with you my true convictions and what's right. And if we do, we'll close on our founding fathers, actually, since you brought the question up. What would Thomas Jefferson say? Or what would George Washington say if they were here today, this morning? I think they would see a country that is still a little young, actually. That's what he would tell us, that we still have another 250 years and then some left in us. that yes, we're going through our adolescence right now. We are figuring out who we are going to be when we grow up. And when you view it that way, for me, it all makes sense again. And so, no, we don't have to be this nation in decline. I think we still can be a nation in our ascent. And so if you all do your part, I promise you, my family and I, we will do ours to make sure that we will look our kids in the eye and mean it when we tell them, you still do get ahead in this country with your own hard work, your own commitment, your own dedication. And that you know what? You are free to speak your minds at every step of the way. That is the American dream. That is what I am leading us to. And with your help on January 15th, including going to the right location, which I appreciate, with your help, that is what we are going to revive to save this great country. Thank you for coming out today, guys. God bless you.